All right. Welcome back to Crime and Unwind, where we sip, chat, and dive deep into the darkest mysteries. I'm Aixa.
And I'm Denise, and today we're traveling into the depths of northern Maine to a tiny rural town called New Sweden. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. But in September of 2024, something happened that shattered this small town peace. 14-year-old Stephanie Damron walked into the woods and vanished.
Whew, this case is layered. Family dynamics, an isolated lifestyle, a history of prior incidents, law enforcement controversies, and chilling unanswered questions. As of June 2025, Stephanie has not been found. In this extended episode, we'll go deep into the timeline, investigative twists, and every single known detail. Buckle in, pour that glass, because this one is emotional.
That's right, grab your wine, listeners, because today we're telling the story of Stephanie Damron, and we're not leaving anything out.
That's right. So today we are sipping on this apothic rosé. It says here that it's a rosé with dark secrets.
Definitely fits the vibe.
It sure does. All right.
Thank you. Cheers.
That's not bad.
No, it's okay.
We're not big on rosé.
No.
We don't do a lot of rosé.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, that's not bad.
No, we'll drink it. It won't go to waste.
All right. So let's get started. Who was Stephanie Damron? So Stephanie Earlene Jen Damron was born October 6, 2010 to Christopher Dale and Lisa Marie Damron. Her life from the beginning was full of movement. Her family relocated frequently. West Virginia, Texas, Illinois, before finally settling in the remote town of New Sweden, Maine in 2021.
Right. Their lifestyle was what many would call off the grid. Their home sat on 26 acres of rural land. No indoor plumbing, no running water, electricity from a generator, and 6 kids from the ages of 8 to 21, all homeschooled. Stephanie was described as quiet and sweet, shoulder length brown hair, green eyes, stood about 5 feet tall, and she weighed 130 pounds.
So she was reportedly shy, had no close friends, and very limited access to technology. According to her mother, Lisa, Stephanie had no friends at all, actually. But her story and her disappearance suggest that that may not have been the whole picture.
Right. So let's rewind to 2015. Lisa and Christopher Damron, her parents, were arrested in Texas for deadly conduct, child endangerment, drug possession, public intoxication. And at that time, their children were temporarily removed from the home by Child Protective Services.
Right. Now, though the kids were returned by December of that year, the arrest led to long-term effects. The family's social media shows tension with authorities. And in 2019, Christopher posted that they were heading to Maine away from these bad memories.
Right. By 2021, they had settled in New Sweden. But their isolation and distrust of institutions deepened. So remember, Stephanie and all of her siblings were homeschooled. They were raised without social media or any electronic devices, which makes the events of 2024 even more shocking.
So September 23rd, 2024. It was a Tuesday. Stephanie was home with 3 siblings and a man known as Grandpa Richard. He's an older, non-related figure who lived with them for several years. Her parents, Lisa and Christopher, they were out for a job interview.
Right, so around 3 p.m., Stephanie had an argument with her 16-year-old sister over chores. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? According to Lisa's interview, it wasn't unusual. But shortly after, Stephanie walked outside where Richard was doing maintenance on the door.
Right, so Richard told Lisa that Stephanie looked back at him with tears in her eyes, and then she turned around and walked into the woods behind their house. Woods that she knew very well. But this time, she did not come back.
So when her parents returned and learned that she hadn't returned, they began searching. That night, no sign. September 24th, her father reported her missing.
Yeah. And I think it was my understanding that they were under the impression that you had to wait that 24 hours to report her missing.
Yeah.
Now that has been debunked, and you don't, if your child is missing, do not wait 24 hours. You report them right away.
ASAP.
Alright, so Maine State Police Troop F initiated the investigation alongside the Major Crimes Unit North. Now the FBI deployed their Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team. Canines, drones, and thermal imaging were used. They combed the area extensively.
Volunteers joined. A community-organized search on October 26 brought 28 people who walked over 10 hours. They did find some objects, however, it wasn't clear if they belonged to Stephanie.
Right, so the Maine Warden Service, they covered huge parcels of forest with help from cadaver dogs. Detectives canvassed locally and as far as Canada, but weeks passed that turned into months. Right.
So here's a more detailed timeline of key events.
Yep.
Summer 2024, Stephanie had ran off several times. Once, just a month before she vanished, she was found hiding in the woods. September 23rd, her and her sister argue. Stephanie walks into the woods, last seen by Richard. September 24th, reported missing by her father. State police begins their investigation. September 26th, first public statements from police. October 2024, parents confirmed that she did argue with the sister. Then FBI expanded search. On October 26th, first community search, 28 people, remember we said, walked over 10 hours. November 11th, father states Stephanie used an old flip phone to access the internet. Potential contact with strangers online. Which I don't know why the father would not have said this from the beginning.
I know, and they said it was Grandpa Richard's phone. It wasn't Stephanie's phone.
Exactly. So that's kind of a red flag.
He stated he didn't even know that the flip phone could access the internet.
So December 2nd, a $15,000 reward was announced by the FBI and new photos were released. December 21st, a candlelit vigil held at New Sweden's First Baptist Church. Now we're in 2025. January 6th, over a dozen new tips since reward.
Of course.
And then the interviews were ongoing. On January 7th, 2025, Lisa Damron's Dateline interview says that Stephanie looked back crying, then walked into the woods. A vehicle may have been heard shortly after.
Yeah, but their driveway was like half a mile long. And
exactly.
Now
you understand this is a very rural area.
Yeah, this is literally like in the woods.
Yeah.
So they weren't sure if it was a vehicle or what it could have been. Somebody heard it, somebody may have heard it. I don't know. But then came some disturbing discoveries. So a girl with blue dyed hair matching Stephanie's description was seen at a gas station in Buckton, Hannaford with an older man. So the FBI did investigate this. Stephanie had reportedly messaged a 32-year-old man and another in his 50s using her grandfather's old flip phone. A neighbor said that Stephanie tried to steal his truck weeks earlier. He said that he dropped her off at her uncle's house nearby.
And that uncle, he allegedly released aggressive pigs and dogs when volunteers approached his property. The FBI searched it later, but some believe that they missed critical areas.
Yeah.
Now that's
crazy. Now he initially said, yeah, come search my property, no problem, and then he released all these animals. And wild pigs, I mean
that's definitely a red flag.
So tips also linked that area to meth trafficking routes into Canada. They were super close to Canada's border. A chilling theory emerged. So could Stephanie have been groomed, lured, and taken by traffickers?
That's a very good point. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, right? Law enforcement trust. I mean, we kind of get into a lot of these stories that we talk about. More than often, this is the case.
Yeah.
where authorities fuck up. Let's just keep it real. You know what I mean? So, yeah. So this isn't just speculation. There's actually in Maine's local police department, there is documented concern about them. Documented concern of things that they've failed to do
or did wrong. So a Marine named Eric Foote was missing for 4 months. His case was mishandled. The officer involved, Chandler Cole, was arrested for falsifying reports. Another officer in Maine's local police was actually selling fentanyl to high school students. So there's a precedent for corruption like this. I don't know.
Yeah,
this police
that's the authorities. We want our kids to be comfortable with, right? Good. So the family did ask repeatedly to search nearby rivers and specific areas to be searched.
Yeah.
One river was just 2 miles from their home, has reportedly not been searched officially. Why not? Why not?
See, the FBI brought in agents from Boston and Pennsylvania. So some see that as hope, but others wonder if they're seeing something that we aren't.
You know what I mean? Like what Boston and Pennsylvania?
Yep, so they definitely brought in help.
So Lisa Damron told Dateline that the family is heartbroken. She says that Stephanie had ran off before, but that this time was different. They couldn't find her, they didn't hear from her, and that apparently this terrified them.
Yeah. So Jerry Harm, Stephanie's great aunt, she's been very vocal in her defense of the family. She says that they search constantly, that they've been harassed online, that people are wrongly blaming them.
I'm Stephanie's great aunt. Stephanie's daddy is my nephew. She got in an argument that morning with her 16-year-old sister. They'd been arguing, picking at each other for probably a couple hours. And Stephanie got up and walked out into the woods. That was nothing unusual. The kids, where their land is, they're surrounded by woods. The kids know those woods. They play in the woods. Yeah. You know, they've been in that area for 4 years now. When she walked off into the woods, they didn't think nothing of it. She's going to go out there and cool off and come back. Lisa and Christopher, her parents, were not home at the time. They were gone on a job interview. When they got home, the sister and brother said Stephanie walked out into the woods. Star and Stephanie got into an argument. Well, Lisa then started riding around looking for her after walking out there and not finding her. And after hours of searching, they called the police.
So her father, I mean, initially they were super cooperative with the police and, you know, they allowed police to interview them and to search their properties, but they did suddenly stop. And, you know, it's very divided because some say, you know, they're being harassed, you know, they're being blamed and, you know, they're looking for their daughters. Others are saying, well, maybe they're involved. It just seems a little too suspicious. You know, maybe they could have something to do with her disappearance and are just trying to cover it up. So, I mean, I don't know. They just completely stopped cooperating with police, didn't let them on their property anymore.
Right. And I think the timeline of certain things just doesn't make sense either. A lot of things that were brought up later in the investigations, I feel like should have been brought up in the beginning.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of holes in this one. A lot of questions, a lot of holes. I don't know.
I mean, in the extensive history with DCFS and
exactly.
You know, I mean,
like the charges from before was crazy.
I mean, I understand off the grid lifestyle, but neglect is neglect, I guess. And you know, were these children being neglected? Were they not being taken care of? I mean, drug use.
It was enough for them to be temporarily taken from them.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. So even Jerry, however, admits that Stephanie may have planned this. She may have wanted to leave. I mean, you have a teenage girl off the grid, not a normal lifestyle.
Yes.
You know,
maybe
no
wanting
friends.
contact.
Exactly.
the outside world. I mean, she tried to run away before.
Exactly.
And from my understanding, there's an older sibling that no longer lives with them that did, go off on their own. I mean, maybe she did plan it, but
maybe. But I guess the question is, did she leave or did she end up being somewhere worse?
So now it's unfortunate that there's not a lot of information. So that's all we have to go on is the old flip phone.
Yeah.
Now we don't know exactly what was found on it. She was reaching out to older gentlemen. Her parents were talking about dating sites and all this stuff. I'm not sure. The uncle with the pigs and the family making I don't want to say an excuse. They were out at a job interview. They said that they were looking for work, so they weren't there when Stephanie went missing.
We're at a job interview that day. We got a couple phone calls, couple messages, where we live at and the way we live. The first few hours, there was no reason to raise a red flag. So we got the phone calls that she took off up the road, and we figured by the time we get home, she'd be back, and that would be the end of it. She'd be home. But a day later, we ended up calling the state police, and we still don't know what happened to her. We just want her home. The situation with the phone is it was not her phone. It was her grandfather's phone. We had bought an old simple phone. We didn't even know it could connect to the internet. We tried several times to connect to the internet. We could never do it. But come to find out, this cheap $20 flip phone was how she ended up connecting to the internet. And that's what it led to this, is she found a way to get on one of these dating websites or something like that we didn't know about, because we just assumed that phone wasn't capable of it, because our kids are raised, no social media. We live off grid. We keep to ourselves. We don't bother people. But we honestly do think that she did meet somebody online and probably pick her up at this point.
I don't know, it just seems like like you said, there's a lot of holes in this story, and it's unfortunate that still to this day we don't know. So Stephanie would be 14 years old now. She may have changed her appearance. She may be afraid, or she may be in danger.
So we asked our listeners to share her missing poster. You can do that by visiting FBI.gov and search Stephanie Damron. Her photo's there as well as her story.
Yeah, so if you do have any information, contact Maine State Police at 1-800-924-2261 or the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI, or you can even submit a tip anonymously at tips.fbi.gov.
Yep. So of course this episode was hard, but Stephanie deserves to be found.
Yeah.
And someone, somewhere, knows something.
Yeah, these kids disappearing is always tough.
It's always hard.
But we'll keep her story alive. Most of all, we'll keep asking questions.
Yep. So until next time, stay curious, stay aware, and bye.
Bye.